Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santa Rosa Rural Cemetery. This is going to be part 3. We've already talked about the second to last hanging of the Old West, which took place here in the cemetery. And then we talked about the lone survivor of the Centralia Massacre in 1864. Today we're going to talk about some of the more interesting characters buried here. So let's go. All right, everybody. So here's today's first grave, complete with footstone. And this here is a man named Thompson Mize. And the reason I want to talk about Thompson Mize is he was the first person buried here in this cemetery in 1854, before it was even a cemetery. And here's what happened. He came west to Santa Rosa with his family in the fall of 1854, and came all the way from Iowa via wagon. And only 45 days later, 45 days after he arrived, he was seen stumbling around the general store here in Santa Rosa, obviously just drunk out of his mind. And the next morning he was found floating in a pond near where the courthouse is today. And he was the first person buried here because they needed a place to put his body. And this land was owned by a man named Oliver Beaulieu, who acquired the land from Maria Carrillo. We'll talk about Maria Carrillo a little bit later on and her family. But anyway, Oliver Beaulieu purchased this land, used it as farmland. But he said, hey, I'm not really using that green grassy hill up there for anything. You guys can put them up there. So in November of 1854, this is where they buried Thompson. So as I said, he left behind his family, a wife and 4 daughters. So rest in peace, Thompson, 31 years old. All right, our next stop here is this tall obelisk we see through the trees. And this marker marks the spot where Annabelle McGoffey Stewart and her husband Absalom are buried. And Annabelle was born in Virginia, and then during the Civil War she was a nurse. She was a battlefield nurse, and her husband was a doctor. And then after the war they came west to Santa Rosa, where Annabelle would become the first female medical doctor in the area. She would also be the first female to join the American Medical Association west of the Mississippi. And she was loved by many. She was called Dr. Deer by the community, by her friends. And her specialty was bringing babies into the world. So we want to thank them both for their accomplishments and all that they did for the soldiers and also here in the community. All right, coming up on our next stop here is another tall obelisk. This is our highest ranking Union officer of the Civil War. This is Lieutenant Colonel of the 134th Ohio Infantry. This is James B. Armstrong. He fought at the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky, guys. And he came west after the war was over and became active in the lumber industry. Wow, it's beautiful. You don't see too many like this anymore, new ones anyway. And in 1880, he started the process of donating 490 acres of his old growth redwoods from his property. It was the first parcel of the 805 acres that would become Armstrong Woods. If anybody is familiar with Armstrong Woods, this is the guy. So I want to thank James for his contributions, both in the war and for donating those woods, because it's a beautiful place. If you guys ever get out to this area, check it out. There's even a tree named after him, the Colonel Armstrong. So thank you, James. So this next grave we're going to talk about, pretty interesting here. I see the little black angel there on the left, and the stone says Davis Wright, colored boy, died May 17th, 1865, age 12 years. And at first, it looks like a sign of the times, you know, like it may be degrading, but there's more to the story than that. So, Samson had Davis and several other black people in his household. They were listed on the census as servants, but were said to have been members of the family. And when Davis died at 12 years old in 1865, they didn't, you know, they could have put him somewhere else, just giving him some cheap wooden marker, but they didn't. They gave him a granite marker, and it is said that they put colored boy on there as an act of defiance. Here in Santa Rosa, as I've mentioned before, this town was settled mainly by Southerners, and there were a lot of people that believed in slavery, even though it was outlawed here. Wasn't allowed in California, but anyway, a lot of people had problems with blacks being treated the same as whites, and Samson, as I said, put Davis here in the family plot. Would later bury other family members next to Davis. And Davis was 12 years old when he passed. They say that, you know, he got sick. I'm not sure what it was, but back then, you know, a lot of things could kill you. So that's what happened to poor Davis. But they got him that granite marker and wanted him to lay here with the rest of the family. So here he is, Davis Wright. All right. So this next grave here, some of you old West fans like me might recognize the last name. There's the original stone, weathered with time. And here's one that they put in later on. John Wesley Clanton. And if anybody knows that last name Clanton, Ike Clanton, Billy Clanton, Newman Haynes Clanton, also known as Old Man Clanton. But John Wesley Clanton was the older brother of Ike and Billy Clanton of Tombstone fame. After the Civil War, John Wesley Clanton was in the 30th Texas Cavalry for the Confederate States of America. Born 1841, died 1916. But after the war, he and his family traveled west, and we know his brothers and his parents settled in Arizona and got in their trouble. Ike and Billy, of course, were in the gunfight at the OK Corral with Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and Wyatt's brothers Virgil and Morgan. Ike, of course, lived, but Billy was killed in that fight. And John Wesley Clanton, he kept on moving west before that. You know, when the family was moving west and some of them stopped in Arizona, he kept on coming west. Married a girl here in Santa Rosa and stayed out of trouble for the most part, although he was, of course, pretty upset when he learned of his brothers being involved in that and Billy's death. And he actually went out to Arizona, hired a lawyer, and was trying to get the Earps to take the fall for that, which didn't happen, of course. But here he is, John Wesley Clanton, one of the Clantons that stayed out of trouble. All right, coming up to the next couple of stones here. Another Confederate officer here. This is John Gotea Presley. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Confederacy, and He's here with his wife, Julia. And John Gotea Presley was a native of South Carolina, as you can see there on the stone. But if you look up the Articles of Secession for South Carolina, when South Carolina was trying to secede from the Union, you'll find his name on it. He signed that Articles of Secession for South Carolina. And after the war, he and his wife here came west and settled here in Santa Rosa. He felt, believe it or not, like Santa Rosa was more sympathetic to the cause than back home in the South, you know, where things were changing very fast. So here he is today. Came out here. He was an attorney and later on a judge here in Sonoma County. And another funny story about the stones here. So you saw probably with John Wesley Clanton and now John Gotea Presley here, the stones come to a point. And it's the same with a lot of Confederate stones that you'll find in cemeteries. They say that the stones come to a point instead of being rounded off so that no Yankee could ever sit comfortably on top of the stone. I always thought that was pretty amusing. So here he lies, and there's another story about John Gotea Presley here for all of you interested in ghost hunting. John Gotea Presley has been seen standing near a stone and walking this way. You see that obelisk in the middle there? Well, there's two stones. I'll walk this way a little bit. Two white stones on either side of that. Short stones. And those are the graves of Robert Press Smith Sr. and Robert Press Smith Jr. They were also Confederate officers. And it is said that John Gotea Presley walks from his grave to theirs every once in a while. Next up, the McDonald plot. This is where Mark McDonald and his wife Ralphine are buried. And their children are up here. You see Ralphine, born 1842, died in 1918. And Mark, acorns everywhere crunching. Mark was born in 1833 and died in 1917. Sorry for the shaky camera, guys. So Mark, he went to school to be an engineer. Got his degree doing that, but decided that he wanted adventure instead. So he signed on to be the captain of a wagon train, which took him to Virginia City, Nevada. When he got there, he saw that they needed roads from the town to the mines. So he made his money constructing roads. And then he invested his money in the mines. Smart move there. He moved to San Francisco after that and got a seat on the stock exchange. And then he and Ralphine bought a small piece of land with muddy water. They dammed it, and he turned it into a lake and named it after his wife Ralphine. It's called Lake Ralphine today. He worked with the Big Four, who were Leland Stanford, C.P. Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker, to bring the railroad through Santa Rosa. He owned all of McDonald Avenue, and his wife one day requested a getaway house from San Francisco where they lived. She was just tired of the fog, I guess, which I can imagine a lot of people would. So he built her the McDonald Mansion here on McDonald Avenue in Santa Rosa, which still stands today. It's been remodeled over the years, but he modeled it after her home that she grew up in Mississippi. So I'll show you guys a picture of that beautiful place. This whole area here was built as a place for the rich, for the wealthy. That's what Mark McDonald wanted. He wanted the stage to stop here and for everybody to see just how beautiful this place was that he constructed. And to get to our next location, all you have to do from the McDonald plot is to turn around, and you're right here. This is the plot. This is the Carrillo family plot, or one of them anyway. This is the grave of Julio Carrillo. He was the son of Maria Carrillo and the brother-in-law of General Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo. For anybody who knows General Vallejo or Vallejo, as we know him here. The next episode, he's going to play a big part in it, so stay tuned for that. I'll tell you about Julio here, the son of Maria Carrillo, as I said. He came north from San Diego with his family after his father died, and they were actually the first family here in Santa Rosa to settle. General Vallejo, of course, was in Sonoma, and Maria Carrillo, after her husband died, got in touch with the general who was married to her daughter and asked if there was a place for them up here. So he got her a bunch of acreage, and they came up to Santa Rosa here, and they're all around Sonoma County. The Carrillo family still exists today, but after his mother died in 1849, Julio inherited about 2,000 acres from Santa Rosa to Cotati, which was Rancho Cotati back then. So he owned the land that my house sits on today. And over the years, he would donate most of his land. And yes, I did say donate. I'm sure he sold a little bit, but he was a pretty generous guy and donated a lot of the land. He had a drinking and a gambling problem, and lost a lot of his money. And he had 14 children, so he needed to find a way to support them. And being so respected around here in this area, the city of Santa Rosa gave him a job as a lamplighter, especially in the plaza area. And then when he died in 1889, Julio's funeral was the largest that Santa Rosa had ever seen. And General Vallejo even stood where I stand right now and made a speech at Julio's gravesite. So thank you for your contributions, Julio. Rest in peace. So here we are at the grave of John Richards. And I've always found his story very interesting. So John Richards was born in Kentucky. He was born a slave. And he came out to California after buying his freedom in 1856. And when he got out to California, to Santa Rosa here, he opened a barber shop and bathhouse. And apparently it was a pretty popular place. He was a pretty popular guy, not just amongst the blacks in the area, but also the whites. Everybody thought this guy was pretty great. Even though Santa Rosa was more Confederate leaning, everybody respected this guy. He was known as a good man in the area and a hard worker. And his house was also kind of a safe house for people who had either escaped, other slaves who had escaped the South or had bought their freedom. And at one point, Santa Rosa had 20 black people in the whole town, and 8 of them lived in the Richards house. So it's kind of just, as I said, a safe house for people to go to. And John Richards, by the end of his life, he only lived to 55 years, but at the end of his life, he owned bathhouses and barbershops, combination of the two, in Santa Rosa, Ukiah, and Calistoga. So here's his final resting spot. So next up, this is the memorial for the victims of the 1906 earthquake, which happened on April 18th, 1906. And a lot of you may know about San Francisco being decimated in that earthquake. Fire took a lot of lives in the earthquake, and here in Santa Rosa, this was called the most destroyed town of all. And I'll tell you why. Because somewhere between 100 and 120 people here in Santa Rosa died in that earthquake, which accounted for about 2% of the town's population at that time. 2%, that's a lot of people. But one of the victims here, as we see all these plots, all these squared off plots, these are all different victims. In this plot here, we have about 18 victims from the earthquake. Some of them are unknown, and then we have several buried throughout the cemetery as well. But one of the more, I guess you could say, well-known names, maybe not now, but back then, was this lady here. It's a CH. It looks kind of like a G, but it's a C. And this was Cecile Heath, but she was better known as Miss Excelia. And Miss Excelia was a vaudeville performer, and she specialized in gun twirling, sword fighting. She would juggle swords, and she'd been on tour here in Santa Rosa with her theater troupe, and was staying at the Grand Hotel when it collapsed in the earthquake. They pulled her, the news back then said that they pulled her lifeless body from the ruins of that hotel. So here she is today, and man, may all these people rest in peace. What a horrible event. All right, now we're gonna get into our veterans here in the cemetery. And we've been here before. Of course, this is right by where the hanging tree was, right there. That's where the hanging tree stood. But this is the Grand Army of the Republic Memorial. And as you can see there, it says it was founded shortly after the end of the Civil War. The Grand Army of the Republic was a fraternal organization of federal veterans who advocated on behalf of its members, promoted patriotism, and helped to make Memorial Day a national holiday. Peak membership was around 490,000 in 1890. The organization dissolved in 1856 when the last surviving Union veteran of the Civil War died. The sons of Union veterans of the Civil War became the legal heir and successor to the GAR by a deed of conveyance. And here's the grave of Mr. Horst himself, who fought at Gettysburg. I don't believe he died there. I think he was one of the lucky ones, but he rests here today, so thank you for your service, sir. All right, guys, we approach our last grave of the day. And last but definitely not least, I want to tell you guys about Harry Barkus here. Harry Barkus Jr. only lived from October 4th, 1933 to October 30th, 1933. Not even a month old, but just a sign of the times. Of course, this was during the Great Depression. And I'm sure little Harry here died from something that he would have been cured from today. So we want to make sure that he's not forgotten. So Harry Barkus Jr. This stone, I'm sure his family put all the love they could into it. I didn't have much else, so rest in peace, Harry. All right, guys, if you made it this far, just wanted to tell you thank you for watching this video. A lot of people think that cemeteries are morbid and all that stuff, but I really feel like there are so many great stories, so much great history beneath these stones that it really needs to be told. So want to do my part in passing the stories on to you, and I hope you'll do the same and keep passing the stories on. And it's important for the next generation to know about things that have happened in the past, how we made it this far, different tragedies that have happened over the years. It's there's a lot of sadness, but there's a lot of pretty interesting stories as well. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the video. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.